Imagine a document shrouded in secrecy, circulating among Washington's elite. Its pages contain shocking allegations about Donald Trump, a man on the verge of becoming the President of the United States. Spies, secret meetings, and even an alleged compromising tape. The stuff of spy novels, yet this was real. This was the Steele Dossier.
Unraveled Podcast.
The dossier's existence sent shockwaves through American politics, igniting a firestorm of controversy that continues to this day. It painted a picture of a presidential candidate potentially compromised by a foreign power, entangled in a web of clandestine dealings. The implications were staggering. But the Steele dossier wasn't a product of Trump's political opponents, at least not initially. Its origins were far more unexpected. The story began with Republicans alarmed by Trump's rise, who sought to uncover the truth about his business dealings and potential foreign entanglements. Their search for answers led them to Fusion GPS, a firm specializing in opposition research. Led by Glenn Simpson, a former investigative journalist, Fusion GPS began digging into Trump's past, unaware of the explosive secrets they were about to unearth. As Trump secured the Republican nomination, whispers of Russian interference in the election began to circulate. The Kremlin, it seemed, had developed a keen interest in the unconventional candidate. Trump's praise for Vladimir Putin and his calls for closer ties with Russia raised eyebrows. Meanwhile, the Democratic National Committee, along with Hillary Clinton's campaign, grew increasingly concerned about Trump's potential ties to Moscow. They needed to know the truth behind the rumors, to understand the extent of Trump's relationship with the Kremlin. Mark Elias, a lawyer representing both the DNC and the Clinton campaign, turned to Fusion GPS, asking them to continue the investigation they had begun under Republican auspices. The focus shifted from Trump's business dealings to his connections with Russia. To navigate the complexities of Russian politics and intelligence, Fusion GPS recruited Christopher Steele, a former British intelligence officer with extensive experience in Russia. Steele's expertise would prove crucial in piecing together the intricate puzzle of Trump's alleged ties to Moscow. Steele's investigation, drawing on his network of sources within Russia, yielded alarming findings. His reports suggested that the Kremlin had been cultivating Trump for years, viewing him as a potential asset who could advance their interests on the world stage. The dossier alleged that Russia had gathered compromising information on Trump, potentially including a tape of an incident involving prostitutes in a Moscow hotel room. This scandalous allegation, while unverified, would become infamous as the P-tape and fuel endless speculation. Beyond salacious rumors, the dossier contained serious allegations of collusion between Trump's campaign and the Russian government. It claimed that Trump associates, including Paul Manafort and Carter Page, had coordinated with Russian operatives to influence the election in Trump's favor. Steele, deeply concerned by his findings, shared his dossier with the FBI, believing it contained information crucial to national security. The dossier, once a collection of whispers in the shadows, was about to be thrust into the harsh glare of public scrutiny, forever altering the course of American politics. At the heart of this political earthquake was a company few had heard of before the storm hit, Fusion GPS. This wasn't some fly-by-night operation run out of a dingy basement. Fusion GPS was the real deal. Founded by Glenn Simpson, a seasoned investigative journalist, formerly with the Wall Street Journal, the firm specialized in digging up the kind of information that people in power would rather keep buried. Simpson, with his years of experience chasing down leads and cultivating sources, had built a reputation for being thorough, relentless, and discreet. Fusion GPS wasn't in the business of flashy headlines or sensationalism. Their reports were detailed, meticulously documented, and designed to withstand scrutiny. They were the kind of firm you hired when you needed answers, not rumors. Initially, Fusion GPS's work on Trump was funded by the Washington Free Beacon, a conservative news outlet. Their interest in Trump wasn't particularly nefarious at this stage. It was during the Republican primaries, and they were simply trying to get a handle on the unpredictable businessman who was shaking up the race. The Free Beacon's directive was straightforward. Dig into Trump's business history, his finances, any skeletons lurking in his past that could give their preferred candidate an edge. It was standard opposition research, the kind of thing political campaigns have engaged in for decades. No one, not even Fusion GPS, could have predicted where this initial inquiry would lead. Section 2. Digging into Trump's empire. Fusion GPS, true to their reputation, began meticulously piecing together a picture of Trump's sprawling business empire. They pored over public records, financial filings, court documents, anything that could shed light on the man who was quickly becoming the GOP frontrunner. Their team, composed of experienced investigators with backgrounds in journalism, finance and law enforcement, knew how to follow the money. What they found wasn't exactly shocking, at least not for anyone who had followed Trump's career. There were bankruptcies, lawsuits, allegations of shady dealings, the kind of baggage one might expect from a businessman who relished the art of the deal, often pushing ethical boundaries in the process. Yet, there was nothing particularly explosive, no smoking gun that would derail Trump's candidacy. As Trump inched closer to securing the Republican nomination, the Washington Free Beacon's interest in funding the research waned. After all, why would they continue to finance an investigation into their own party's likely standard-bearer? With Trump's nomination all but assured, the spigot of funding from the Free Beacon ran dry. Fusion GPS, however, had only scratched the surface. Their investigation, while revealing a pattern of questionable business practices, hadn't uncovered anything definitively incriminating. Little did they know that the most intriguing chapter of their investigation was about to begin, funded by an entirely different set of actors with their own motivations for wanting to understand the enigma that was Donald J. Trump. Section 3. A change of patronage. With the Republicans no longer interested in bankrolling the Trump investigation, Fusion GPS found themselves at a crossroads. They had a team of investigators, a wealth of information, and a growing sense that there was more to uncover about Trump's dealings, particularly his relationship with Russia. But without funding, their investigation would grind to a halt. Enter the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Trump, once a nuisance for the Republicans to manage, was now their main opponent, and they had their own set of concerns about the Republican nominee. The rumors of Trump's affinity for Vladimir Putin, his praise for the Russian leader, and his business ambitions in Russia had raised red flags within Democratic circles. Mark Elias, a prominent lawyer representing both the DNC and the Clinton campaign, saw the value in continuing the work that Fusion GPS had started. He understood the importance of opposition research, of digging into an opponent's past to expose weaknesses and vulnerabilities. In Trump, they were facing an opponent unlike any other, and they needed to understand the forces that shaped him, particularly his relationship with Russia. Through the law firm Perkins Coie, Elias hired Fusion GPS to continue their investigation, shifting the focus explicitly towards Trump's ties to Russia. It was a move born out of both political strategy and genuine concern. The Democrats, like many in the intelligence community, were starting to suspect that Russia was meddling in the election, and they needed to know if Trump was somehow entangled in this foreign interference. This change in patronage would prove to be a pivotal moment, setting in motion a chain of events that would have profound implications for American politics. Section 1. Enter the Spy Master. Fusion GPS, armed with renewed purpose and funding from the Democrats, knew they needed a specialist. Delving into the murky world of Russian politics and intelligence wasn't a job for just any investigator. They needed someone who spoke the language, understood the culture, and had the contacts to navigate the shadowy corridors of power in Moscow. They needed someone who could tell a genuine lead from a Kremlin-planted disinformation campaign. Enter Christopher Steele, a name that would soon be whispered in newsrooms and debated in the halls of Congress. Steele wasn't just some armchair analyst with a passing interest in Russia. He was the real deal. A former officer with MI6, Britain's elite intelligence service, Steele had spent years cultivating sources and running operations in Russia. He knew the players, the power dynamics, and the ruthless tactics employed by those in Putin's orbit. Steele's career had been defined by his deep understanding of Russia. He had witnessed firsthand the country's transformation from the ashes of the Soviet Union into a newly assertive power under Putin. He had seen the rise of the oligarchs, the brutal crackdown on dissent, and the Kremlin's increasingly aggressive posture on the world stage. If anyone could untangle the truth behind Trump's Russian connections, it was Christopher Steele. Tasked by Fusion GPS with uncovering the extent of Trump's Russian ties, Steele immediately tapped into his network of sources. These weren't just casual acquaintances, they were individuals with deep connections to the Russian government, the intelligence services, and the world of oligarchs and power brokers. These were people who moved in the shadows, privy to secrets that could make or break empire. As Steele began piecing together information from his sources, a disturbing picture began to emerge. It wasn't just that Trump had business aspirations in Russia or that he had courted Russian investors for his real estate projects. It was deeper than that. The Kremlin, according to Steele's sources, had been cultivating Trump for years, viewing him as a potential asset, someone they could potentially manipulate. The Russians, skilled in the dark arts of compromat, the gathering of compromising information for blackmail, allegedly had something on Trump. The most salacious and widely circulated allegation was the existence of a tape filmed during a 2013 trip to Moscow for the Miss Universe pageant, showing Trump engaged in a compromising act with prostitutes. This P-tape, as it became known, would take on a life of its own, fueling endless speculation and media frenzy. While the P-tape dominated headlines, Steele's dossier went far beyond salacious rumors. It alleged that Trump's team had been in contact with Russian operatives during the campaign, potentially coordinating efforts to damage Hillary Clinton's candidacy. The dossier named names including Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager, and Carter Page, a foreign policy advisor, alleging that they had secretly met with Russian officials. Steele's sources painted a picture of a quid pro quo. Russian assistance for the Trump campaign in exchange for a softening of US policy towards Russia, including the lifting of sanctions. The dossier suggested that the Russians were eager to see Trump in the White House, believing he would be more amenable to their interests than Clinton. The allegations were explosive, with the potential to derail Trump's candidacy and plunge the United States into a constitutional crisis. As Steele delved deeper into his investigation, a sense of urgency grew. He realized that what he was uncovering wasn't just another political scandal. It had the potential to undermine American democracy itself. The allegations, if true, suggested a foreign power had interfered in a US election to help install a president of their choosing. Steele knew he had to act. He couldn't just sit on this information, hoping for the best. He had to get it into the right hands, to someone who could investigate the allegations and take action if necessary, but who could he trust? Leaking classified information was a risky proposition, potentially jeopardizing his career and his safety. In July 2016, Steele made a fateful decision. He reached out to a contact at the FBI, arranging a secret meeting in Rome. There, in a nondescript hotel room, Steele handed over a copy of his dossier to FBI agents. It was a risky move, but Steele believed that the potential threat to national security outweighed any personal risks. The FBI, already investigating Russian interference in the election, took Steele's information seriously. They had been picking up chatter about potential links between the Trump campaign and Russia, and Steele's dossier, with its detailed allegations and credible sources, added fuel to the fire. The dossier, once a collection of whispers in the shadows, was now in the hands of the FBI, about to become a central piece in one of the most consequential investigations in American history. The Steele dossier landed on the FBI's desk like a ticking time bomb. It was a collection of explosive allegations, some more credible than others, pointing to a potential conspiracy that could rock the very foundations of American democracy. But how much of it was true? And how could they verify information coming from sources deep within the shadowy world of Russian intelligence? The FBI, tasked with protecting the nation from both foreign and domestic threats, found itself in a precarious position. Ignore the dossier and risk allowing a potential threat to national security to go unchecked. Investigate it and risk being drawn into a political firestorm, especially if the allegations proved unfounded or politically motivated. The Bureau, under the leadership of Director James Comey, faced a critical decision. They couldn't just dismiss the dossier out of hand. It came from a credible source with a proven track record in Russian intelligence. But they also couldn't act solely on its contents, especially given the unverified nature of some of the allegations. They needed to tread carefully, to separate fact from fiction without jeopardizing a potential investigation. The FBI decided to proceed cautiously, using the dossier as a roadmap for further investigation. They began cross-referencing Steele's information with their own intelligence, looking for corroborating evidence that could either validate or debunk the dossier's claims. The Bureau was walking a tightrope, trying to assess the credibility of the dossier while navigating the highly charged political atmosphere of the 2016 election. Section 2. A dossier under scrutiny. As the FBI delved deeper into the Steele dossier, they encountered a mix of promising leads and frustrating dead ends. Some of the dossier's claims, particularly those related to Russian interference in the election, seemed to align with what the intelligence community was already seeing. But other allegations, like the infamous P-tape, remained elusive, with no clear evidence to support their veracity. The FBI's investigation, codenamed Crossfire Hurricane, focused on potential links between the Trump campaign and Russia. They scrutinized the activities of Trump associates like Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, and Carter Page, all of whom had connections to Russia. The dossier's allegations provided a framework for their investigation, but the Bureau was careful not to rely solely on Steele's information. The FBI's use of the dossier, particularly in obtaining a FISA warrant to surveil Carter Page, would later become a major point of contention. Critics, particularly those sympathetic to Trump, argued that the Bureau had overstepped its bounds, relying on unverified information from a politically motivated source to spy on a U.S. citizen. The Justice Department's Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, would later launch an investigation into the FBI's handling of the FISA application, concluding that the Bureau had made serious errors and omissions in its submissions to the court. The Horowitz report, while highly critical of the FBI's conduct, did not find evidence of political bias in the initiation of the Russia investigation itself. Section 3. Political warfare and the weaponization of intelligence. The Steele dossier, once a secret document circulating among spies and diplomats, was about to become a weapon in the increasingly bitter partisan battles engulfing Washington. Its existence, leaked to the press, ignited a firestorm of controversy, fueling accusations of espionage, cover-ups, and a deep state conspiracy to undermine Trump's presidency. Trump and his allies seized on the dossier's more salacious and unverified claims, using them to discredit the entire Russia investigation as a witch hunt orchestrated by his political opponents. The dossier, they argued, was nothing more than a collection of fabricated stories funded by the Clinton campaign and weaponized by a biased FBI to delegitimize Trump's victory. The public, bombarded with conflicting narratives from both sides, struggled to make sense of the complex and often contradictory information. The lines between legitimate intelligence gathering, political opposition research, and outright disinformation became increasingly blurred. The dossier, intended to expose potential wrongdoing, had become a tool of political warfare, used to attack opponents and sow distrust in institutions. The Steele Dossier's legacy is a cautionary tale about the perils of mixing intelligence with politics. It demonstrated how easily unverified information, amplified by partisan media and opportunistic politicians, can poison public discourse and erode trust in democratic institutions. The dossier's long shadow continues to loom over American politics, a stark reminder of the fragility of truth in an age of hyperpartisanship and information warfare. Section 1. The dossier goes public. For months, the Steele dossier had circulated within a tight circle of intelligence officials, politicians, and journalists. It was a ticking time bomb of explosive allegations, its contents closely guarded, its existence known only to a select few. But the whispers of its existence grew louder, fueled by leaks and rumors, until finally the dam broke. In January 2017, just days before Trump's inauguration, BuzzFeed News published the dossier in its entirety. The 35-page document, with all its salacious details, unverified claims and explosive allegations, was laid bare for the world to see. The impact was immediate and seismic. The media went into a frenzy, dissecting the dossier's contents, debating its veracity, and speculating about its implications for the incoming administration. The public, already deeply divided by the contentious election, was further polarized by the revelations. Trump's supporters dismissed the dossier as fake news and a politically motivated smear campaign. His detractors saw it as confirmation of their worst fears, proof that Trump was unfit for office and potentially compromised by a foreign power. The publication of the dossier thrust the allegations of Trump-Russia collusion into the center of the national conversation. It was no longer a story confined to the shadowy world of intelligence agencies and classified briefings. It was front-page news, dominating cable news cycles and igniting fierce debates on social media. The Steele Dossier, once a secret document, was now a political weapon, wielded by both sides in an increasingly bitter and divisive battle for control of the narrative. Donald Trump, never one to shy away from a fight, responded to the publication of the dossier with characteristic fury. He unleashed a torrent of angry tweets, denouncing the dossier as fake news, a hoax, and a total fabrication. He accused his political opponents of orchestrating a witch hunt to undermine his presidency. Trump, known for his thin skin and his penchant for counterpunching, seemed personally wounded by the allegations contained in the dossier. He repeatedly and vehemently denied any wrongdoing, insisting that there had been no collusion between his campaign and Russia. Trump's supporters rallied to his defense, echoing his claims that the dossier was a politically motivated fabrication. They pointed to the fact that it had been funded by the DNC and the Clinton campaign as evidence that it was a hit job designed to delegitimize Trump's victory. The dossier became a rallying cry for Trump's base, further solidifying their belief that the media, the intelligence community, and the deep state were all aligned against Trump. The dossier, whether true or not, had become a symbol of the deep partisan divisions that were tearing the country apart. The Steele Dossier landed like a grenade in the already fractured landscape of American politics, deepening existing divisions and fueling a sense of paranoia and distrust. The country found itself locked in a bitter debate, with each side retreating further into their own echo chambers, consuming information that confirmed their existing biases. The media, often accused of bias by both sides, struggled to cover the story responsibly, balancing the need to report on the explosive allegations with the need to avoid spreading unsubstantiated rumors. The public, bombarded with a constant stream of contradictory information, found it increasingly difficult to discern fact from fiction. The Steele Dossier, intended to expose potential wrongdoing, had instead become a catalyst for further division and distrust. It fueled a sense that the truth was elusive, that everything was political, and that no one could be trusted. The dossier's legacy was a toxic mix of partisan warfare, intelligence leaks, and media frenzy, all contributing to a growing sense of cynicism and disillusionment with American democracy. The dossier's shadow loomed large over Trump's presidency, shaping the political landscape and influencing the course of events. It led to the appointment of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, whose investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election would consume Washington for the next 2 years. The dossier, whether true or not, had unleashed forces that would have a profound and lasting impact on American politics. The Steele Dossier, once a collection of whispers in the shadows, had exploded into the public consciousness, leaving a trail of debris and unanswered questions in its wake. It had ignited a political firestorm, fueled partisan battles, and cast a long shadow over American democracy. But as the dust settled, the question remained, what was the true impact of this controversial document? The dossier's most immediate legacy was the appointment of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, whose investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election would dominate the first 2 years of Trump's presidency. While Mueller's investigation ultimately did not establish a criminal conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia, it did find that Russia had interfered in the election in a sweeping and systematic fashion to help Trump win. The dossier also exposed the deep partisan divisions that had come to define American politics. It became a political football, used by both sides to attack their opponents and advance their own narratives. Trump and his allies relentlessly attacked the dossier as fake news and a hoax, using it to discredit the Mueller investigation and portray themselves as victims of a deep state conspiracy. Democrats, meanwhile, were divided on how to handle the dossier. Some argued that it was evidence of Trump's unfitness for office and should be used to impeach him. Others worried that focusing too heavily on the dossier would backfire, playing into Trump's hands and alienating voters who saw it as a distraction from more pressing issues. The Steele Dossier, regardless of its veracity, had exposed a troubling truth about American politics. In an age of hyper-partisanship and information warfare, truth itself had become a casualty. The lines between fact and fiction, between legitimate intelligence gathering and politically motivated disinformation campaigns, had become increasingly blurred. The dossier also highlighted the dangers of outsourcing opposition research to private intelligence firms. While such firms had long played a role in American politics, the Steele Dossier demonstrated how easily their work could be manipulated for partisan gain and how quickly unverified information could spread in the digital age. The dossier's legacy is a cautionary tale about the need for greater transparency and accountability in both government and the media. It is a reminder of the importance of critical thinking, media literacy, and a healthy skepticism towards information that confirms our existing biases. In the end, the Steele Dossier serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of democratic institutions and the importance of safeguarding them against those who would seek to exploit them for their own gain. It is a call to action for all Americans, regardless of political affiliation, to demand better from their leaders, their media, and themselves.